utmost commitment, that's the way it's always been. We rise up to the challenge, we give the game our all. With sheer determination, we go in for the ball. With the crowd thunders, go Cats, we break the banner down. We know they'll play.
Hi everybody, welcome to the BigFooty Cats podcast. My name is Willo. Tonight we are having a look back at the home and away season of 2016, and I'm joined by two very special guests, both who have been I've been fortunate to have on once already this year. Welcome first, Partridge.
Thanks very much, Willo. Pleasure to be here again.
No worries at all. And returning, well, he's a podcast veteran, but only once this year, SJ.
Yes, thanks for having me. Is it a coincidence that I'm on during the bye week, or what's happening there?
I'm not sure.
Just wheel out the big guns for the week off, or
both of you two have been pretty hard to lock down for the course of the year. So
no, happy to be here. Happy to be here. Looking forward to finals.
The stars have just aligned for the bye week. Given the AFL's decided to give us nothing for the weekend, we've got to provide the entertainment.
Oh. No, we do have the VFL.
Well, that's true, yes. But as I said, the AFL's given us nothing.
Yeah.
So, last weekend saw the final home and away round of the year with games played. And Geelong have managed to get themselves, we managed to finish second on the ladder with 17 wins. 5 losses, a percentage of 143.8, and also on the back of 7 wins on the trot, I believe, compared to last year where we had 11 wins, a draw. We also got the split points for the split result with the Adelaide game that didn't happen, and finished 10th. So a decent old improvement, I think we'd all agree. I suppose the simple place to start is we're just having a bit of a general look back at the year. Is what have you made of our year, SJ, thus far?
Yeah, well, it's been an interesting one, hasn't it? I mean, if we go far in this final series and looking back on this year, looking back on season 2016 and years to come, it'll be a hard one to describe, I think, because at no stage have I ever really thought Geelong looked a real threat for it, and yet we finished second, not far off first spot, and knocked off almost every contender. So I find those two things hard to put together in my mind, but they happened.
Yeah, it's I exactly understand the point you're saying. I've gone into a lot of games where I've thought I'm not overly confident. I'm not sure how we're going to go, but in particular against the higher placed teams, the top 8 teams, we seem to come out on top the most part. So I'm still not 100% sure what the true colours of this team actually are. Partridge, what's your initial thoughts just on the home and away season?
Yeah, I think SJ summed it up pretty well. There's been games and patches within games where they've looked fantastic and had some really seriously impressive wins. Like I think the win in Adelaide in round 8. I think even though it was only whatever it was, 4 or 5 goals, that was a really start to finish with a better team. The BGWS of Geelong, and again looked, I thought, the better team all night. All day, whatever it was. There's been games like that, but then there's been quarters or halves where they've looked just, in the first 3 quarters against Richmond, were as bad as I can remember them ever looking. So I'm guessing it's just a combination of a lot of factors coming together, and sometimes they've clicked and sometimes they haven't. And I think the only side in the top 4 or top 8 that we haven't beaten is Sydney.
Yep, that's right.
If you look at it right now and say, well, I probably still think Sydney have looked the team to beat, if there is such a thing. But at the same time, I think other more intelligent posters have pointed out if there's ever been a year where it's up for grabs, this is it. So Yeah, 3 more wins.
So we've got to, I suppose that's how we look at it now as we're entering the finals. We'll start with the positives. As you mentioned, Partridge, about how there's been some fantastic wins. What's been your highlight from the year so far? And it can be a game, it can be a player's performance. What's been your highlight so far?
Aside from the whopping great elephant in the room wearing the number 35 jumper, which is the obvious one about the addition of Dangerfield, I'd probably lean towards getting Henderson slotted into defence. Especially because I don't know what round it was he actually came into the team, but I'm pretty sure he didn't start the season there. And from memory, he took a few games to get his stride. He was a bit sloppy, just a bit rusty early on. But I would have thought since then he's been, up to me anyway, I think he's been our best defender this year. Certainly our best big man. Not to diminish what Taylor and Wanning have been like. They've been terrific, but I think he's been exceptional.
He did start the year in the side because I was watching the highlights that's in our highlights thread from the round 1 game against Hawthorn, and he kicked the goal in the last quarter at a pretty crucial time from a set shot. So, but I agree with what you were saying. He didn't start the year. I remember, especially in the practice matches, he looked a bit...
He was a bit shaky early on.
Yeah, he didn't look that settled, and there's a few people already were starting to question the recruitment of him.
I was probably one of them. I don't know if I did, but then...
Yeah, but he was in there early. He was a bit of a slow burn early, I think, but then I actually think he really sort of stepped up. I think in the Adelaide game was the first time I really saw it, when we played Adelaide, and Lonergan got hurt or knocked out early, and he went to Tex and pretty much shut him down completely. And I reckon his confidence just took off from there. SJ, what's been your highlight?
I guess just bouncing back from a really disappointing year last year. And, really props there have to go to the coaching staff and the list management, who took some pretty heavy risks by topping up in certain areas where we clearly were lacking. Being that stable sort of ruck division, midfield grunt, that sort of thing. And also the introduction of a few players back into the team who had a really rough trot from injury, like McCarthy, Cow and Menzel. But, I think you would have been pretty optimistic to predict Geelong would finish second on the ladder this year before round 1, off the back of 10th last year. But we've really managed to keep all the players on the ground. I think we've, as we discussed, it's come in fits and spurts, but when they're on, they look really good as a team, which, with a lot of players who haven't necessarily played a lot together, it's come together quite well. And I probably didn't really think that was possible this year. But yeah, the other one I would say then off the back of that is Menzel as well. I mean, he had a little glimpse towards the end of last year after not playing for 4 years, but the way he's come in, he's even worn a few and had a few injuries along the way, but he just keeps coming back and he just keeps performing. And, I don't think we can win the flag without him, because I think he's the most dynamic forward we have in the team. He's always unpredictable. He can take a mark, he can snap a goal, he can, make something out of nothing. So he would have to be, he probably even flies under the radar a little bit, but he would have to be the number one story for me this year.
Yep. I think that's fair enough. If I'm, I'll probably look at just from a highlights-wise of a game. When we played, and I mentioned it just before, when we played Adelaide in Adelaide early in the year, that was probably one of my highlights from the year, and it probably helps that my partner and her family are all Mad Crows fans as well, so there was a few messages going back and forth about that game, but just all the pressure on the Dangerfield game and everything like that. And whilst he got a lot of the ball, I didn't think that was one of his more influential games.
No, I think he was a little nervous, to be honest.
Yeah, but that in particular, that first quarter and a half was probably as most dominant a footy as some of the more dominant footy we've played for the year.
Yeah.
We just butchered chances after chance after chance, but I was getting messages from my father-in-law for who was at the game, just saying, like, at quarter time, you should be 6 goals up. Half time, you should be 10, 11, 12 goals up by now. This is, you are absolutely slaughtering us. And I did a podcast for the North Melbourne board when we played them, and one of the fellas there lives in Adelaide, and he actually said to me off after the podcast, he goes, I went to that Geelong Adelaide game, and he goes, that was the best I've seen a team play in a long time. He said it was just dominant the first half, absolutely dominant. So from a playing point of view, that was probably my highlight, and it was sort of the first game where I've sort of looked and thought, geez, who knows what we could do this year, just the way we'd sort of gone about it. But I think the problem was, and this probably leads on to the next point, was what were your low points for the year? I think we came back from Adelaide. I hope I'm not getting my dates wrong, the wrong way around here, but I think we came back premiership favourites and then proceeded to lose the next 2 games. If I've got my head around the right way, we dropped the 2 games to Carlton and Collingwood, and we sort of came back from Adelaide thinking, look at us go.
Yep.
And then that was probably my disappointment, was and I didn't watch the Collingwood game due to moving house, but the Carlton game was one of the more frustrating games to watch. Just, I don't know, we just looked flat and useless. So from a low light or disappointment, it was probably that fortnight was probably the most disappointing aspect, and just the way we had seen, we'd come back from Adelaide, we looked fantastic, everyone was raving about us, and then just serve up what we did afterwards was pretty bloody ordinary. So I don't know.
The funny thing about those 2 losses were that they were then followed by 3 wins against sort of top 6 teams.
Yes. Just
and then another loss to a bottom 10 team after that.
Yeah, that was
that kind of sums up the year, doesn't it?
And I think that probably just that little run that we just touched on then probably explains a lot about just the feel of the year. Just it's a bit why some people are still a bit unsure about how we really are and where we stand. So, I don't know if you've got a low light or a disappointment, or something you haven't been overly thrilled with, SJ?
My low light, my low light, I don't know if you call it low light, but it comes off the back of that a little bit. You were talking about in Adelaide, and look, I haven't quite got my head around it, but it's a combination of in many games we've been quite inaccurate when it's counted, or we might have got away with it, but it's caused a lot more trouble for a long period of that game. So in that Adelaide game, we could have really put it to bed before halftime, as you said, but instead it became a 4-quarter slog. And the other thing is, and I guess this is all tied in together, but just there's been a lot of games where our forward line has, I think the team's playing really well across the ground, winning the ball, controlling the game, shutting down in the back line, everything, but we just really have struggled to kick goals at times. And that's a really frustrating way to watch footy. I know
We've been dysfunctional.
I know you can't complain much when you win 17 games a year, and obviously many teams have it worse than that, but there's not much more frustrating things in footy than literally dominating a game, and you might win by 3 goals, or you might even lose it because you haven't put the score on the board, or the opposition, or you've kicked 12 goals 25 and the opposition's kicked 12 goals 2, which seems to have happened a few times. So that's probably been my low light in quite a successful year, the fact that I think we could have been a lot more dominant with not much more difference. in terms of our gameplay.
Yep. Partridge?
I think it'll be just I think a fairly common one is just not so much, as SJ says, not so much that there was always losses, but just the unbelievably bad quarters or even occasionally halves we can serve up. And there seems to be no way to predict when they're going to come either.
Yeah.
No. Or 3 quarters in the case of Richmond.
Yeah. Oh, no, yeah, they're just like that, and it seems really weird because it's not something that the team's in a bad stretch of form, because they've come just as frequently after really good wins as they have after bad losses.
Yep. I do wonder if a lot of it is mental, and how are we to judge, but it just seems to have been a pattern where when we've had a few good wins, it's almost like from the outside, from my perspective, it looks like they get ahead of themselves and they drop their bundle a bit. And the Brisbane game was, I thought, Exhibit A, or perfect example of it. We smashed them in the first quarter, and then it was like at quarter time they thought, beauty, this is going to be easy.
Job's done.
Job's done, ripper, and went to sleep, and Brisbane came back at them, and then they copped a spray and realised at half-time, thought, oh, actually, this isn't that easy, and again, put the foot back down and went away. And I may be looking at it maybe simplifying things too much, but I just thought it has to be mental for the way it's been happening.
I reckon, though, it's a little bit based on the way we play, though, as well.
Yep.
And apart from last week, and I don't know if we'll get onto this, but apart from last week, we've clearly moved the ball very slowly all year. Retain possession, hang on to it, etc., etc. And I can see why you do that. It means you're not taking many risks, and our slower, taller backline doesn't get exposed as much. But I think at times it's actually cost us because we take our time working up the field, and against some of those sort of younger teams. Even though some of those teams were just having a crack against us, like Richmond was having a real decent crack against us that game, you miss that 20-metre chip at half back by 2 metres, and you turn it over there after you're trying to take your time working down the field. But it's a very quick goal going the other way, and I think in those games that we've lost, or struggled in against Richmond, against Essendon early on, where we won but it wasn't convincing. Against Collingwood, against Carlton. That's how we've sort of played, and the opposition, they've played well, but they've also taken their chances. Like it's not as though they've actually dominated us, but it's just been that when they've got the ball, they've taken it quickly down the other end off our turnovers and scored. Whereas I think when we're on and we can hit those targets, it works quite well, and for some reason that's happened more against the better teams than against some of those up-and-coming teams who have really built off the momentum they've got with a good start against us.
Yeah, and I think the Richmond game probably is a good example because that last quarter, we changed the way we played.
Yeah.
Yep.
And we weren't slow and methodical from the back line because we didn't have time to be. And we ripped them to shreds going straight through the middle of the ground.
Yeah. So, the interesting thing was about that at three-quarter time, sorry, Partridge, but three-quarter time, I was thinking that this has got to change here because literally our top 4 spot is on the line. Are we just going to continue the same thing for another 30 minutes and lose, or are we actually going to risk something and do something different? Because I reckon against Carlton, the game went to a similar script, and the last quarter also went to a similar script, and we didn't. It felt like for 4 quarters we played the same way and we lost the same way, and it was just a waste of time. Like not at any point. There was no change of, well, let's take, this team is not great who we're playing. Let's try and do something differently. So I'm really glad we did that against Richmond because it just shows that, when you have to win, you have to win. There's no point losing you might as well lose by 60 if you're going to lose by 40.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And now we'll have a look at we'll just briefly touch on some...
Sorry, well,
yeah, mate.
I was just going to say the one thing further to what SJ said. The only other part that, of course, we're not aware of is maybe part of it is fitness. Because they know that they're a pretty fit side and they run over the top of teams. Who knows, maybe the way they played the first 2 and 3 quarters is about conserving fitness so they've got X amount left if needed. Who knows, maybe.
Yep. Wouldn't surprise me.
Well, just to touch on that a bit further, I'm pretty certain early in the year, someone had mentioned it, that they looked at the breakdown and that Selwood, Danger, a couple of our key players were spending more time on the bench in the third quarter than any other time during the game, or over every other quarter sort of a thing. And there was a bit of a theory that with the lower rotations, our guns were getting rests in the third quarter to allow us to sort of come home hard in the last quarter. And our last quarter record's been phenomenal this year.
Yep.
So I do wonder, without actually having the details, the numbers available to me, I do wonder if how much is in that as well.
I'd have no doubt the clubs would measure that, so it wouldn't surprise me in the slightest.
Yep. And now we've touched on, we've sort of already touched on it a little bit, just in terms of players, but I wanted to know from the two of you which players have impressed you the most this year. And I mean, you can go to the obvious answers if you like, or if there's a bit of a bolter from left field that has surprised you, has blown you away. Which players have you been, I suppose, have done it for you this year, Partridge, or most impressed you?
This is good. Well, I've already mentioned Henderson. So I'd say for an ability to come into the team and pretty much hold down a spot, and I definitely have doubts about that, with McCarthy, I think, would be a reasonable one to point out. My bolter that I predicted for the year was Darcy Lane, so I really was on target there. I'd say probably McCarthy, then a goal late in the year, certainly. Even Ruggles didn't do anything wrong. He came in and just, certainly not spectacular, but held down that spot and should play his first final and completely deserves to, in my opinion.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't know if there's been so many bolters as such as guys have just been able to do their role.
Yeah,
nice.
I agree.
And it has been, when they've played well, it has led to a cohesive team.
Yep.
Which has been nice.
Yep, absolutely. SJ? Sorry, Partridge, are you still going?
No, I'm finished.
Yeah. SJ?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's been, apart from at the very top there haven't been too many surprises. If anything, there's been a couple of disappointing players. But I think that's probably what's been the pleasing part, because we've had a really, in terms of the way the team's operated, I think it's been, as weird as this is going to sound following what I just said before, it's been quite a consistent team. You almost know what you're going to get from most players most weeks. Now, some players have probably gone backwards a bit and they're now out of the team, which is, a discussion for another time. But, I think a lot of the ones, almost the next generation following our premiership success, the guys who have played the bulk of the season, we've sort of got what we expected, which has been really good. The one thing I would call out is that I think the addition of Zach Smith has been really important. Mm-hmm. And to be honest, I think when we're at our very best, it's when you can say this of most teams, well, those teams play different ways, but I think when Geelong's at their very best, they're winning it out of the centre and getting into the forward line quickly, where it's a 2-on-2 or 3-on-3, and that's how we score quickly. And I think you'll find that that's how we did it in a couple of quarters against Melbourne, and in our other good quarters this year. And that's really based on Smith's work with the midfielders at the centre. So he's come in, he's played 21 games. People were questioning him about his durability, including myself, but you'd certainly take that every day of the week if you were offered it at the start of the year.
Yep. I think he's formed a really good partnership with Stanley. I reckon they really complement each other, because they both offer something a bit different,
but
a bit similar at the same time.
Yeah,
and they've each got their strengths, and
Yep.
And Smith's follow-up work after he taps is pretty bloody impressive. The way he throws himself onto the ground and will tackle. And Stanley's follow-up work, if he gets the ball in his arms, that's still probably nearly my most favourite thing to see, with him, just the look of a big ruckman tucking the ball under his arm and just steaming away from a stoppage. I love it. So
I think you're right. I think they're almost opposite sides of the same coin, aren't they?
yes.
Like in some ways they're quite different, but really they're actually pretty similar. They're sort of similar builds, get a similar amount of ball, push forward and kick a goal every second week.
Both very athletic.
Yeah, athletic, and yet in some ways they're, Smith is that extra probably couple of inches taller and a little bit more, he's got the height on his side, and Stanley's a little bit shorter and a little bit quicker and
he's got the
got that on
strength
his
as
side.
well.
Yeah.
So I think they work well. I think in terms of players, and I am happy to admit that I have written this person off many, many, many times, but I've actually started to come around on Josh Cowan. I still have. I'm still like not, jumping up and down and screaming he's best 22, but just the fact that he's gotten in, he's played his 7 or 8 games in a row. He's getting his 18, 20 touches. He's tackling, he works hard, and he just seems to help our structure and the way we set up. And I was really, really harsh on him and questioning. I think
Not as harsh as I was.
No, I said to someone, I'm pretty sure he was the most fortunate Geelong player that's ever got a contract. To someone, they just kept giving him new deals.
I don't know if that's
nothing.
harsh. I think that's pretty realistic.
But it's good to see that he's starting to repay the favour a bit. And early on, the first few games, I'm like, he's not adding anything. But as it's building, I'm more than comfortable for him to be in the team still. As long as he just doesn't try to burst through tackles, that's probably everyone's biggest beef, because he needs to realise that he's not real big and strong and able to do that.
I was going to say, Willo, if you've been harsh, I've been much harsher. I think I just...
Is that just a general life comment there, Partridge?
Yeah, it could be. I think I describe him as the most fortunate player in the league. And again, I don't think it was an exaggeration.
No, and I think everything I said about him, I stand by at the time. Like, I still...
Yeah, absolutely. And even when he got promoted, his VFL form wasn't that... It was okay. It wasn't like, up with the regular guys who dominated that level.
He had one scorching game, his first one back, and then a few mediocre ones.
Yeah, but I agree. He's in space. I'm sort of getting more calm now. But, absolutely, iterate, underline, put it in bold letters. Never, ever, ever try and break a tackle.
But I just think, apart from the whole trying to break tackles thing, he seems like he's got a good footy brain.
Yeah.
And there's been a few times where he's just done, under pressure, he's just done a little dinky little kick under someone or over someone and got it out to someone. I thought, and like, where a lot of players wouldn't see that and wouldn't do that.
Oh,
so...
it's a long list of predictions you get wrong, so I'm more than happy to be wrong about that one.
Yeah, and that's it. And it's not, we're all humans, we all get them wrong, so I'm happy to concede that I've got my share wrong. But that's just... And probably a few weeks ago, if you'd asked me that question, I wouldn't have said his name as a sort of a highlight of a player. And probably, I'd also, just as a personal highlight, is whatever our medical staff have done this year, touch wood, that it continues for another month. But considering how injury runs the last couple of years, it's been pretty exceptional work to have the team's minimal injury list, and we haven't done a heap of, I don't think, soft tissue injuries.
No.
There's been a few collision ones and things that you sort of can't avoid, but
it's as good a season with injury really that I can remember.
Yeah, me too.
Does that?
And I think it's coming in an era where it matters more than ever as well. You keep, if it's that even at the top, keeping the same sort of 25 base players or whatever going through, with the odd exception, I think has been really crucial for us this year, particularly on top of adding new players into the squad and into the team. Last year and the last couple of years was like a revolving door, and who was the fill-in ruckman this week, and who was the third best midfielder this week? It was almost laughable at times. But even like you look at Leicester City, who won the EPL a couple of months ago, and there was all these stats coming out of it about how they basically used 15 players for the whole season, and they'd have a great run with injury, and they'd manage their players well, and I really think it makes sense, right? There's only 40 odd players on a list, and you can only spend X amount of dollars on them. So the top sort of half of them are going to be where you invest your big dollars and your star players. And if you're like the Doggies this year or the Cats last year, and you're missing 10 of those weekly, it only makes sense that you're not going to be anywhere near the best as a team. So I think it's been crucial to us finishing in the top 2 this season. And
it could genuinely be the difference between winning a flag or not. Like, it's just, with the year as close as it is, so tight between all the top teams, all it could take is if you can keep your best team on the park for the next month, that could go a hell of a long way towards you getting your name on that trophy at the end of the year.
Yep.
And even not necessarily on grand final day, but the fact that, maybe no one's going to be rushed back for grand final day, or maybe no one's going to be rushed back for a final. The fact that pretty much everyone we've got, bar Henderson, is ready to go. And that has played a big chunk of footy in the last 8 weeks. I think that's going to count a lot.
Well, even in the VFL now, it's not really the main focus, but even for depth, from what I saw from, was it Saturday's game or Sunday's game? The top 3 or 4 like AFL listed players, they all to me show good enough form that you'd be like, they'd be okay at senior level. If you did need to call on them, they looked ready to go, and that's what we had in 07, especially.
Yeah.
So what we'll go on to now is I put the call out for just some suggestions or questions to come our way. So I'll ask you to my elite panelists. I'm going to ask a couple of questions. So the first one, we had Lana ask a few questions, but we'll pick just one out. Is Blitzarves becoming insignificant? And it's a very interesting question because he went from last 3 years, where he's been basically playing as a ruckman, and as we've permanently had someone hurt, he won the best and fairest last year. There was no questioning his improvement. It was dramatic. This year, he seems to have stagnated, but is it just that we don't really know what position we want him to fill? He's not quite good enough to be a midfielder, and he's not quite needed to be a ruckman. Is it along those lines? Where do you see, I suppose, Blitzarves, Partridge?
Yeah, you have to start with me.
Well, you can discuss his elite running patterns, Partridge.
Absolutely. Yes. No, I put it a while back, not a few weeks ago, I think. What is interesting to me, though, is that he had a great year last year, or a good year. I mean, I honestly don't think anyone had a great year for us last year. I thought he, was very durable. There was about, he and Motlop, Guthrie, maybe a couple of others, they were the real good players. There weren't many. Good on him. He absolutely deserved it. But it seems to me the more of the role he'd been given over the last 3 years, the worse the team fared. And you can go back to the finals in 2013 and 2014 and then all of last year, and it's like he's been on the periphery at best this year. And especially now that Selwood and also Menegola have come to the seniors, because the midfield depth is really strong. I don't know where he plays. And with Stanley and Smith both, thankfully, staying fit, he's not needed for ruck duty. So it's a weird one. I mean, I actually thought, and I've been very critical over the last few years, so I'm not going to pretend otherwise, but I actually thought he'd shown good signs as a third tall defender, because for someone who isn't coming from the footy background, it's a very simple role dedicate yourself to it, and we know he's disciplined. It's one of his very good things about his game. But as a midfielder, I don't know, because I don't see him being a player that the opposition are going to be worried about, because it's almost like they're happy for him to have the ball because he's not going to hurt them. And when the heat has been really on in pressure situations, he's not the most composed. So, yeah, I'm not too sure. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I think clearly he's not done a lot this year. Like, he hasn't had a lot of the ball. He hasn't kicked a lot of goals. He hasn't won a lot of hit-outs. But he's run around a lot for 120 minutes. So you can almost forget he's actually out there these days, which is a weird thing to say about a player who stands out quite a lot. And everyone recognised him very easily from an early stage, being from a different sort of background. But I just wonder if he almost is that insurance policy for us in games. Even if he's whatever he is, our 8th best midfielder pick for the team. Someone's going to be 8th. Who's coming in to take his spot? Holland Smith or someone? So, maybe he's on par with whoever else is going to play that midfield role that day. But, if Smith goes down, if Stanley goes down, if a tall defender goes down, if a midfielder goes down, it's almost like we've got all those bases covered that day just by having him on the ground. So even if someone tagging goes down, he's done that role before as well. So I just wonder if he really is that utility, running around in-game, doing what probably 20th or 22nd best player on the field would do for most sides anyway, which is just sort of do a little bit and not much more. But in the finals, if we lose a really crucial player for us, Blitzarves can actually slot into a number of roles without us having to shuffle the deck chairs too much.
It's almost like it's a trade-off. It's almost like we were saying, well, this guy is not going to have 40 touches as a midfielder. He's not going to be best on ground as a ruckman, but he can potentially hold the fort in those positions if needed.
Yep. Hold the fort and be that. I mean, let's face it. Let's just say Smith goes down 10 minutes in against Hawthorn.
Yep.
In a game that I think, we really need to dominate at the centre. Having Blitzarves there and Stanley for a full game means we probably won't be too far off where we could have been anyway.
Yep.
You could be right. And again, it could be another one of the things that footy clubs factor in now, which previously they never would have.
We've got probably worth looking at. Daz has also asked a question, and basically his question's, who is the most impactful player 2016 that arrived at the club? And he's obviously, Danger's been the most talked about. Has he added the most to the 22? Has it been Smith's ruckwork, Henderson? Has it been Menegola coming in and doing what he's been able to do? In terms of, I suppose, more than just one player, and who's sort of helping the team and everything in other ways, I guess. SJ?
I'll just say Smith then, and for the reasons I said before.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd agree straight away. As much as Dangerfield's been great, no question at all, it's a better midfielder who have added. It's made the midfield group better, for sure, no doubt at all. But we didn't have a durable first ruck, and we've now got that. That means that Stanley's been able to play second ruck, which is great, and the trickle-down effect has been fantastic. Same again, as much as I think Henderson's been fantastic, we had 2 good key defenders already, and Menegola, it's been fantastic late in the season, but at the same time, he's only come in late in the season.
Yeah, and I think you look at anything he does as just a bonus.
Yeah, that's right. Over the course of the whole year, how the team has played and the structure and everything else, I think Smith has been pretty important.
Yeah, I still think Danger, but I think I agree with Smith as well, but probably I'd still have Danger as just the most impactful, because I see the role. I think he brings others. It's a flow-on effect from him as well. He gets a lot of the attention. He gets the ball out. He gets the ball. He's part of the reason. I think he helps the way he sort of continually moves the ball on quick and drives the ball long and quick. It can be really beneficial for us when we're playing well.
Absolutely.
Because
I wonder how he would have gone if he had last year's ruckman in there, though.
Yeah, well, he sort of has. Well, Stanley was a ruckman for half the year. But I just the way, because he never. How often do you see him if he gets a free kick, which he gets a few free kicks? He doesn't, and the good thing about it, he doesn't seem to complain that much to the umpires either, like a few of our blokes do. But he gets a free kick, and how often do you see him push back behind the mark and weigh up his options and slow it right down?
Not often.
He's gone. The minute he gets the ball, he's gone. He doesn't wait. I mean, he can spray his kicks, but a lot of the guys that are moving at that speed can spray their kicks. Yep. But he just can open up the whole game for us. So, and I understand the point, and it's an interesting discussion because obviously Smith's been huge for us as well, and Smith's also added. Him coming in has allowed he and Stanley to sort of play that centre half forward type role as well, and they've both. And Stanley's had some good games where he's played forward. Smith's added another dimension when he's gone forward as well.
Yeah, what was it, 3.5 against Hawthorn in that night?
Yeah, and most of that came from his pressure.
I think 2 were from pressure, weren't they?
Like tackles when he was running down blokes like Duray and smaller players. So, I think they've equally been important. I suppose we couldn't have hoped for a bigger impact from all of our recruits, basically, apart from Scott Selwood, who has been unavailable for the majority of it. We'll find out about his impact, I reckon, over the next month. But if he has as good impact as the other three have had, the recruiters will be needing to give, or the blokes that manage to talk these guys to come to us, giving themselves a good hard pat on the back for their work, because every player they've brought in has been has had an impact.
Yep.
Now we've also. I won't focus too much on the questions because Turbo challenged me to try and keep this short. I've already probably gone over the half an hour, so we'll try and make sure we keep this under an hour. Tonight, as we are recording, the All-Australian team is being announced. So it's worth discussing the players we had nominated and the players then, obviously, that made the team. And fortunately for us, all 3 players that have been nominated have made the team. So Corey Enright has been named on a halfback flank.
His 6th appearance.
Patrick Dangerfield has been named as the ruck rover. And Joel Selwood has been named as the rover. So, pretty fantastic effort. At this point in time, they haven't announced the captains and everything. I'm just going to assume that Selwood will be named the captain from here. I'd imagine that'll be the case. So, I suppose we've talked about Danger a little bit. It's probably worth talking about the old man in the team, who's now the games record holder, Corey Enright, who has just blown me away this year, who's wound back the clock 5 or 6 years, it seems like. It's been remarkable, the level that he's performed. I suppose I'll just grab your thoughts on his year, Partridge.
Yeah, no, couldn't have agreed more. I thought after the first couple of games last year, the Hawthorn and Fremantle losses, I thought he looked, every one of his 33 years or whatever it was to that point. I thought for the rest of last year, I thought he was okay-ish. I thought he had some good games, he had some bad games, much like the team. I actually think this year has been his best year in 3 or 4 seasons. It's actually really been a very pleasant surprise just how even he's been. As most of his career, not a lot of gap between his best and worst. But I thought he's good. I've got no argument from there about him being nominated for the All-Australian team or making it. I think it's been terrific. just amazing to recapture that form he had from 3 or 4 years ago. And just looking, I'm looking while I'm talking. He's actually had the most number of disposals per game since 2010. So there you go. Now, SJ will pull me up on this because the stats don't mean everything, and they definitely don't. But it's an indication that it isn't just our opinion. It's like everything seems to back up that he is definitely lifted his performance back to what it was a few years ago.
I think he's been. I'm not going to put him down at all here because that's not my point. But I think he's really enjoyed the fact that two things. Number one, we've had such a strong midfield which means the back line's been really protected this year.
Yeah.
And instead of having to be accountable to some sort of nippy 25-year-old, 9 years his junior, he hasn't really had to do a lot of that, which I think he'd found himself in the last couple of years more and more having to do. And instead he's being able to be that almost that sweeper role and use really good decision-making coming the other way. And I think that's really benefited him a lot.
Absolutely.
So, and I think the other thing with that is that, adding Ruggles into the team, Buse at times, I think sometimes in the last couple of years, Enright was playing as the only small defender in the team. So I think he's really benefited from the fact he hasn't had to do that type of role as much, and that pressure's been taken off, and instead he could use his skills, take those intercept marks, chop in front, get that 25-metre short kick back into the corridor, back up the ground. That's where I've seen him be a very good player this year, making smart decisions rather than having to chase, a Lindsay Thomas or an Eddie Betts around for 4 quarters, which I probably think at 34 he wouldn't want to be doing too much of anymore.
No, and that's right. You shouldn't have him doing that role, which has been very, wisely they haven't. It's been great.
Yeah, and it plays to his strengths as well.
Exactly.
To read the play and know when to go and know when to spoil and know when to sag off and get the ball himself. So it's absolutely played to his strengths. And then you mentioned SJ obviously a stronger midfield. Well, we've got the Rover and Ruck Rover in the All-Australian team, both in there with Danger and Sell, so which that probably just absolutely proves your point or confirms your point. We have already briefly touched on Danger, but what's your take on the years both of those two players have had? Yeah,
I mean, Dangerfield has been really explosive, and I liked what you said before about the fact that he looks to move the ball quickly, and I really reckon that, I understand out of the back line why you'd move it slowly, and I think that's fine, and I see why we do that. But I think from forward to centre, I don't see why in this day and age where you've got every player within 50 metres of the ball, why you wouldn't try and clear the pack, that congestion around you, why you wouldn't try and break that open from every player as soon as you can, and get it sort of over that congestion, which is what he does. So, he'll get the ball, he'll run 15 and then he'll kick it 60, and all of a sudden the players that are 50 metres away, they've been cleared and it's in a dangerous area. So I love how he does that part of his game. I really think he's at his best out of the centre clearance, and I really think that's where Geelong's at their best as well. We look really potent when we're winning centre clearances, and we can break away like that and isolate Hawkins one-on-one rather than have him in a pack where his output's pretty reduced. And Selwood, I think, has done a lot of unheralded grunt work this year. I reckon he might have even had one of his best years, potentially his best year. Probably played a little bit of a different role, trying to keep it more on the inside, not having to do it all on his own. But every week, some of the stuff he does, I reckon you can only see it if you're at the ground or, if you're really concentrating on him because his play. Just the little things that he does again and again, which make a huge difference. It might be getting that hand in there, which ends up Dangerfield getting the clearance or someone else getting the clearance. I reckon he's been excellent.
And off the back of pretty much a very heavily interrupted pre-season, if I remember correctly as well. Partridge, what are your thoughts on our dynamic duo in the middle?
Yeah, no, I think Solid's been terrific. I don't think he's different. He's certainly not as explosive as Dangerfield. And really, Dangerfield's only weakness is every now and again he's kicking odds and down. And he either has the odd shank, or sometimes I think it might have been Collingwood or Carlton game where like getting kicked was bad. But you live with that. But the rest of his game's been superb. But I think Selwood's been, again, just so consistent, so prolific. And the fact that there's two of them, it gives you very few sides of players capable of shutting them both down, if anyone does.
I think the other thing on that is that in probably the last couple of years we've seen Selwood get sort of heavily tagged in patches, and his output's been reduced. But this year I reckon it was just the Collingwood game where he got tagged, and he was minimised that game. But apart from that, and obviously having Dangerfield there helps because we're sort of spreading our load a bit. But you can't really think of any other game where he's been really down, which he has been a little bit from time to time when he's been, the only cog in the machine there.
Yep. And that's really the one weakness of his game, I would have said, at least part of this year, was you can worry him out of the game if you tag him heavily. And he does get frustrated and sort of looks to the umpires a lot for freeze. He still does it a little bit, but I don't think it's been anywhere near as bad this year. And there's that, just a nice benefit of having Dangerfield next to him as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Now we'll wind up things, but I'll just get brief thoughts from both of you about our final. Well, not this Friday, next Friday night against the Hawks. We will be doing another podcast next week, which will go into a bit more depth and do a bit of a proper preview of the game. But you two gentlemen aren't available for that one, or aren't going to be involved in that one, so I'm just going to touch base with you now about what your expectations are and what your thoughts are heading into our final, into our first final. SJ,
Yeah, I was watching that Collingwood Hawthorn last week, thinking, do I want Hawthorn to win here or not? Do we want to be playing them, bring it on, or do we want to see a home game? I think it would have been against GWS had they lost, or something like that. And really, I think GWS is in the better form than Hawthorn. Hawthorn on field, I think they're struggling. They're just going at the moment. They're struggling a bit, but you never write off the experience of a team like Hawthorn would have against the experience that a team like GWS has in finals. So I never would underestimate them, but I almost think, look, this is actually the perfect time to play them. We've got a game in Melbourne now. We beat them in round one. We've probably got better since then. They probably haven't got too much better since then. Some of our strengths are back to being their weaknesses, being contested marking, where I think we're the number one contested marking team by a long way this year. They're looking really shaky at either end of the ground in the air. They're looking shaky in the ruck, where we've got rucks back. They're a bit like us in that I think speed worries them a bit. And so we don't have a lot of speed. We've got a few players in the centre where I reckon we can exploit them. So, but at the end of the day, if we can't beat them, a shaky Hawthorn who finished fourth, stuck into third in week one of the finals, then we don't deserve to be a premiership contender anyway. So I reckon, look, bring them on. Hopefully we can knock them. Someone else could knock them out next week and be done with them.
Wouldn't that be glorious?
Oh, it's about time.
My Hawthorn supporting boss, that's about all I could hope for, is to be able to get stuck into him about that. Partridge, what are you expecting?
I've probably been more scarred by Hawthorn than you two put together, I'm guessing. Well, I don't know how much older I am. No. I think it really comes down to how well Geelong play. If we play well, I can't see them matching us.
Yeah.
If we play anything close to our best footy for 4 quarters, I can't see them getting close.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean it's going to happen, we're still going to do it. But
the one thing I would say is that they rely, compared to when we had a good run over them, for 5 years or whatever it was, they rely a lot more on the smaller players kicking goals now. Rioli, Puopolo, Bruce kicks a lot of their goals, and I don't think it's any surprise to any Geelong supporter that when we get beaten, pretty much every single game, they are the sort of players from other teams who will kick goals against Geelong. So I think that will be a real focus. I don't think they're going to worry us with any sort of taller players. But you just look at every game we've lost. Collingwood's midfielders kick goals against us. Carlton's half forwards and midfielders kick goals against us. Same with St Kilda. It's never the talls. And Hawthorn has quality small forwards. So that'd be the one worry, I think, for me.
Yeah, no. Like I said, I think that you've never got get a better chance. I think it's very much, there's a lot of Geelong 2014, there's a lot of even Brisbane 2004 about them. And
yep.
They're still good, they've got experience and all that, but yeah, I don't know if they can keep up. I can't see them, if it were to come to it, I can't see them getting close to Sydney and what I've seen in Sydney in recent weeks.
And just to show how it's changed over the last month for them, they were 2 games clear on top.
They were.
A few weeks back, and then they've scraped in to the top 4. So that probably shows how their last month of footy's gone.
Yeah. Well, again, it's one of those things. It's a long year. They've got a few guys over the wrong side of 30. Let's hope they're running out of gas.
Yep, and I'll go into it more next week, obviously. But
I will go into it at the game in the MCC. It could be interesting.
All right, I think that just about wraps it all up. And I will just give one more update. Joel Selwood has been named captain of the 2016 All-Australian team.
Bizarre.
I'm pretty sure it's his, as I'm just looking on Twitter, it's his 3rd selection as captain. So he's actually the 2nd most selected captain.
Doesn't surprise me.
Carey, I'm just reading a tweet from Joshua Kay. Who's a Channel 7 stats bloke, I think, isn't he?
Yep.
Who's got multiple selections as All-Australian captain. Carey has 4, Selwood with 3, and then Roos, Kelly, Voss, Rashudo, 2 each. So he's in some good company.
Absolutely.
So he was always going to be captain when he was named on the field. Even if he was named on the bench, he was probably still going to be captain. But so it just caps off a pretty good night so far for the in terms of all Australians gone, and hopefully the start of a good month now that we are officially in September. Hopefully it's a more good sign of things to come.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much for being involved again, SJ.
No worries. It was an absolute pleasure. I'm not sure what I'm going to do for the next sort of week and a half now.
Well, you've got all this time to start looking forward to our next match.
Excellent. Thanks for having me.
No worries at all. And Partridge, thank you again.
No problem. Any time. Thanks very much.
Not a problem. As I said, we'll be back. I'll be back on next week with a bit of a match preview. I've got a couple of people lined up ready to go. And look, if we win our final, then we're just going to have to keep doing them until we lose one. So we don't want to jinx anything. So watch this space. Until then, I'll be back on again next week. And thanks very much.
Thank you. See ya.
Thank you.